Morals, virtues, principles, do they even matter anymore in American politics? That is the topic of today's Bold and Blunt, and I'm your host, Cheryl Chumley, giving you a Christian conservative look at today's news, politics, culture, and events. We just saw the election in Ohio where voters put into the Constitution a right for abortion and passed at the same time an allowance for recreational marijuana, and the vote margin wasn't tight. It was about 57% in favor of both versus 43% against both. For a heartland state, for a state that is sort of one of those states that you think of biblically based, traditional values, family-oriented, morals and virtues at the forefront of what they decide in politics, that's sort of a shocking vote. So, do virtues and morals matter in politics in America any longer? And before I get into that, I want to quickly mention, if you like Bold and Blunt, you may get Bold and Blunt at edify.app, at washingtontimes.com, at Real Life Network, and wherever podcasts are offered. And I also want to invite you to go to washingtontimes.com, scroll to the bottom of the page and find the newsletter section, click on it, and look for Bold and Blunt with Cheryl Chumley. That's my newsletter. It comes out Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. You can click on it, sign up for it, and have delivered right to your email box all the commentaries, my opinion pieces, and so forth that I write at the Washington Times every day, as well as my twice weekly Bold and Blunt podcast. So you will never miss a Bold and Blunt podcast. What a deal. Americans' already poor ratings of the state of moral values in the United States have fallen further to the lowest point in Gallup's 22-year trend. I am reading from a June 9th, 2023 Gallup news piece titled Views of State of Moral Values in U.S. at New Historic Lows. The 54% of U.S. adults who rate moral values in the country as poor marks a 4 percentage point increase since last year, and the first time the reading has reached the majority level. Another 33% of Americans think U.S. moral values are only fair, 10% good, and 1% excellent. So if you look at that, only 11% of Americans in this survey say that America has passing values and morals, right? Because only fair is barely passing when it comes to morals and values. Unbelievable how our culture has slipped in America. And if you consider that politics is downstream of culture, then this bodes poorly for America's political future as well. If you're a regular Bold and Blunt listener, you know what I'm about to say. If you're not a regular Bold and Blunt listener, then listen up, because this is the basis of everything that's wrong in America right now. Founding fathers gave us a system based on individual liberties that come from the Creator. They're birth liberties. Once you're born in America, you're already guaranteed certain liberties, inalienable rights, life, liberty, pursuit of happiness. Actually, every human being around the world is born into those same rights, but it's only our government, our system, our constitutional system, our democratic republic that enshrines those God-given liberties in our governing structures, in our founding documents. But they also warned that limits on government could not stay limited if the citizens' moral compass was skewed. Americans can only stay free so long as Americans are moral and virtuous and principled. It's only the moral and virtuous and principled who are capable of self-governance, right? Moral and virtuous people don't need to be told that they shouldn't break into stores and steal stuff just because they can. They already know it's wrong. And those who take their morals and principles and virtues from a creator, from God, also know that even if they can get away with breaking into a store and stealing stuff, even if they know that they won't get caught in this world, they worry, they fear the idea of accountability to God one day. And so they naturally restrain themselves from doing that criminal act. Those who are atheists don't have to worry about accountability at a later time. Those who are criminally minded think that they can get away with stuff in this world, and they care little about the idea of accountability at a later time. So these segments of population just run roughshod over other people's rights in pursuit of their own desires in this world because they don't fear accountability. And so government has to step in and impose these consequences on those in society who cannot restrain themselves because of a fear of a one day eventual judgment day. And that really is how government grows bigger, biggest, as we're at in America right now. The fewer people who turn to God for their moral compass, the fewer people who take their virtues from teachings of the Bible or base their principles on Judeo-Christian truths, the fewer people in America we have who do that, the more secular we grow, and the more that opens the door for government to come in and impose more and more consequences in order to bring about some sort of calm and peace to a society that has grown chaotic. When you have people who are incapable of controlling their own behaviors because they have no fear of accountability, a judgment day, then that creates a sort of chaos in society that the left loves to come in and exploit in order to grow government and really to grow their own personal powers. So morals and values are the root of what keeps society free. And in this country, as I just read from that Gallup poll from just a few months ago, we are facing all-time lows when it comes to moral values in this country. And we know it. We know it. We know it, but obviously when you look at what took place in Ohio with the abortion vote and the recreational marijuana vote, both rooted in morals and values, we know it, but we're not doing much about it, really, because the votes are going forward for the immoral causes by a wide margin. And this should be concerning to anybody in America who cherishes freedoms and the ability of America to stay free for the foreseeable future. Pew Research Center. Pew conducted this survey just this past April, taking the consensus of the American public a year after the U.S. Supreme Court handed the abortion matter back to the states to decide. And it's a long survey, but just an interesting chart in the middle of this survey. In 2007, the percentage in America of Democrats versus Republicans who say abortion should be legal in all or most states. For Republicans in 2007, or those who lean Republican, 39% of Americans said abortion should be legal in all or most states. And at the time, also in 2007, 63% of Democrats, or those who say they lean Democrat, thought abortion should be legal in most states. Now fast forward to 2023, April, when Pew Research came out with this survey. 40% of Republicans, or those who lean Republican, said that abortion should be legal in all or most states. So you can see there's like 1 percentage point difference. And if you look at this chart, it's had its ups and downs, but by and large, it's always stayed within that range, 39, 35, 40%, right? Now, Democrats, 63% in 2007 thought abortion should be legal in all states. Today, 84%. 84% of Democrats think abortion should be legal in all states. Isn't that interesting? And now Gallup just recently, just July, comes out with this poll, where do Americans stand on abortion? Most Americans, Gallup finds, most Americans believe abortion should be legal to some degree, particularly in the first trimester. By and large, America's a little bit weak on the moral and virtues front, right? So no wonder they're saying in the poll that U.S. morals are growing worse. They are growing worse. And on marijuana, just saw a poll the other day, 70% of Americans, according to Gallup, 70% of Americans think that marijuana should be legal, recreational marijuana. Look, this is not freedom. The ability to choose abortion on demand or smoke away all day long on weed, that's not really freedom. It's not freedom, it's immorality. And there's a difference there. There's a very big difference, because immoral behaviors lead to clampdowns on liberty, because immorality breeds immorality. And then who's going to come in and calm the chaos that results from that immorality? Well, guess what? Government. Government indeed. And that's what we have going wrong in America right now. And I have a guest today who is going to weigh in on this moral crisis that we face in America, looking at it through the prism of the votes in Ohio. He's a former congressman from Iowa, right there in the heartland of America. His name is Steve King, and he is back on Bold and Blunt to discuss. Steve, thank you so much for being here on Bold and Blunt. I really appreciate your time.
It's good to be back again, Cheryl, and I just always appreciate the work you do, and seems to be a happy time for me when we're having a conversation.
Thank you so much. I love chatting with you as well. You were one of my favorite congressmen when you were in office, and I really do hold your work now in high esteem. The book that you've written and how you bring your faith to the forefront of the political world, which is what I wanted you on the show today to discuss. In Ohio, we just saw the election results, and it was a little bit shocking the wide margin in which abortion was passed as a constitutional right, along with recreational marijuana laws. Can you speak to that? What happened?
Well, yes, and at first there are polls out there that showed that it would carry by as much as 58%. It carried by 57%. That's still stunning, and there's not a way to imagine that people in Ohio are that large a percentage of them in favor of abortion on demand. But that is what this is, and there's really no limit on it. This is the most harsh, far-reaching effort to promote abortion in any language that I have seen in 50 years. And so, what happened was they wrote this convoluted constitutional amendment. It's got 6 different bullet points in it, and when I read it through, and I read a lot of convoluted stuff, get along pretty well with those Harvard lawyers when it comes to that, but this, you can't really get your brain around what it says. So of these points, but here's the one that is the most stunning. I'll just get to that one. I think people can maybe understand that when I read it. It says, this is the 6th point. It says, the proposed amendment, so a constitutional amendment, would always allow an unborn child to be aborted at any stage of pregnancy, regardless of viability, if, in the treating physician's determination, the abortion is necessary to protect the pregnant woman's life or health. Now, that sounds a lot to me like Doe versus Bolton, the companion case that went along with Roe versus Wade. Roe versus Wade limited it to viability, and then, of course, that's a sliding scale. But Doe versus Bolton had exceptions in it that went to the woman's life or health of the mother. They said mother, I think. This is pregnant woman. But the definition of health included familial health. In other words, how do you get along with your family? And financial health. Do you have any bills you can't pay? And
wow.
There's this definition covers everything, and who gets to define this? It's written right into this segment. The treating physician's determination. The treating physician is always going to be chosen by the woman that wants the abortion. So it is completely closed on any judgment on definitions of this, except for the abortionists, the partial birth abortionists, for example, and this essentially legalizes partial birth abortion, which we have a ban on at the federal level. So, but right up to that point, when that baby draws that first breath, and who's going to decide whether that baby draws the first breath or not? If the abortionist kills the baby a minute after they're born, who's looking over their shoulder? And I'd say nobody. This is awful, and it sets the pro-life movement. Well, it stands us back up again. It sets us back, but it stands us back up, Cheryl. Just the political side of this. I mean, I'm just sick to my stomach about it. But I watched as when Roe versus Wade was overturned, that glorious decision on June 24th, that should be a national holiday. Immediately, my Republican friends and leaders in the RNC, the leaders in the U.S. Senate and the U.S. House, they told the incumbents and the candidates, you don't have to argue abortion anymore. When the subject comes up, just tell them, I'm running for federal office. That's out of my hands. The court handed it back to the states. I know Scalia said that for years, that it would put it back into the hands of the states, and it's about the only thing I disagreed with him on. We have to protect life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, or life, liberty, and property would be how John Locke would have phrased that. And life is the paramount right. And so Congress has an obligation to do that. You can't execute somebody without a due process, and these babies get no due process when you hand them over to a partial birth abortionist. So I think that was a huge political mistake for the Republican leadership to convince the federal candidates, now you don't have to argue this anymore. When that happened, it pulled the rug out from underneath the states, and it diminished our strength of standing together, bonded together to protect innocent, unborn human life. And I think that manifested itself in Ohio in a harsh way yesterday.
And I want to broaden it out a bit to bring in the recreational marijuana allowance that also passed, because it's curious to me, the heartland states, when you think of Ohio, when you think of that region of the nation, it always comes to mind traditional, family-friendly, biblically oriented, and so forth. And it just seems like such a shocking passage of two morally bankrupt provisions in a state that just really leans Republican and has voted for a Republican president the last couple of elections, and that has traditionally been, according to Pew Research, filled with God-fearing people. So what are we supposed to take from this?
Well, we've watched some of this degradation of our civilization take place in a quick, I'll say, whiplash fashion. About the time that Biden became president, this whole whole agenda of transgender and those things just got forced on us, and in a matter of 6 months, it was everywhere, all over, and that was pushed in part by the teachers union. This push for this kind of marijuana liberty, which we know is a gateway drug to higher drugs, and we're losing 100,000 young people to drug overdose in this country every year. And so why would Ohioans go to the polls? And they think they're voting for their freedom. And they think if you want to kill your baby, that's freedom. If you want to smoke dope, that's freedom. And the Soros money that was poured into Ohio and other leftist out-of-state money, I heard some of that here just a little bit earlier about how heavy the spending was from out of state. But their effort is to break down our whole civilization. If you can get people smoking dope and being lackadaisical and incapable of operating a cogent operation in a job, if you can do that, if you can pit them against each other because some people have a different sexual orientation than others, and you eliminate that, if you can pull the cops off the street and you can have rogue prosecutors that prosecute somebody because they are a Christian instead of somebody that's an armed robber, it breaks down our civilization. And that goes to the Howard-Piven theory, which is now several decades old, which is overload the welfare, break down the order, and in the chaos you can rise to power out of the rubble of the chaos that you create. That's part of the strategy that's coming at us. And I don't know why people, the marijuana piece of this thing, I'm just amazed how fast it has taken over. And how it's gone across this country in that way. And people are just being sold on the idea that you have freedom. You have freedom to smoke dope, so here you go, pass a constitutional amendment that allows for it in Ohio, and they'll be farming marijuana in Ohio when the frost goes out in the spring, Cheryl.
And you know what? I just saw today, as a matter of fact, that a new poll from Gallup found that 70% of Americans are okay with the legalization of recreational marijuana. That's nationwide.
It's awful. And it's interesting how far this gets flipped around the other way. Somebody sent me there was a screenshot of a website for a kind of a speakeasy. It was in the Netherlands. This is probably 10 years ago. It just stunned me when I read. It said that that would be like maybe a spa or something, or maybe a little bar. I don't remember what it was for sure. But let's call it a cafe on a side street. It says absolutely no tobacco products allowed on the premises. Not to smoke, not to chew, no tobacco products allowed on the premises. But on Wednesdays, it's okay to smoke pure weed here. That's that's just that's upside down as it can be. But
yeah.
Where we are headed in Ohio.
Wow. All right. So you live out in a state that is traditionally valued and so forth. And have you lived there your whole life?
Yes.
Okay. So have you seen changes in your own community that show that America is headed down this dark secular path? Or do you still live in a community that is still pretty much the same as it was since your growing years?
Well, I think the community that I'm in, we're pretty much the same. Our church is kind of unusual, is that it's loaded with little kids and babies. And for me, going to church is just a symphony of babies crying and kids chattering and all. I'd rather hear that than I would sometimes the sermon, just because it gives me hope for the future. And those kids that are in that church from the time they're little on up, first Sunday of their life, every day, every Sunday of their life, they're going to be all right. I watched them now for a couple of generations or more. They're going to be all right. But I don't have to go very far away to see the samples of this either, the examples. One of them would be in Orange City, which many people would say is the epicenter of conservatism and republicanism, even for the country. We've carried that county by 92%. But in the city of Orange City, where you've got a Dutch Reformed church, two different varieties of that, they compete against each other, but there's a group that moved up there and opened up a latte house downtown. And in that latte house, now they've got everything painted up with rainbows. And when I go by in the parade, they stand behind the crowd and make obscene gestures at me.
Wow.
Those kind of things are happening. And it's penetrating into our schools. Some of this wokeness and transgenderism is being taught in the school in the very town where I go to church. Maybe I tell you a little story here. Actually, I laugh at it, but it was pretty good. It was one of the teachers said to the classroom, "Well, you don't really know if you're a male or a female, or if you're a boy or a girl, and it might change on you, and we realize that someday." And she said, "Well, I've had my partner with me. He's been with me for 17 years, and if I woke up in the morning and I was a man, he would still love me." And this fellow in the front row, he's in the front row probably for a reason, named Jackson, he said, "I don't think so." And so she turned to him and she said, "Well, if you woke up in the morning and you were a woman, how would that make you feel?" And he said a little bit, he goes, "Well, that'd be great. Then I'd have some woman parts to play with."
Oh, my goodness.
I thought it was the perfect response, and I just had to shut her down. But to have that being taught in a little, this rural area here, that's a town of about 800 people, and then the rural areas around it.
Wow.
It penetrates in the classrooms because they go to school and universities where they teach that stuff.
Yep, it spreads everywhere, and that sort of circles back to Ohio now, and your expectations from what the vote meant in Ohio going into the next round of elections. Do you see the pro-abortion movement, the pro-recreational marijuana movement drawing steam from this and being able to push similar provisions in other states in the nation?
And I think that it does give them energy and power to do that. And I think also you've got a U.S. Senate race coming up in 2024 there in Ohio. Sherrod Brown's going to be trying to get reelected. And I bet he's feeling a little more comfortable these days seeing what Ohio has done. But I also say, and I think that does spread a bit around the country. It was a colossal mistake for the leadership in the Republican Party at the national level to tell the federal candidates just stay away from abortion and just pass it off and say it's the state's issue. That took away the people that were defending life, decided they were going to cut from the playing field and cut and run is what happened. And I knew that at the time, and I'm not making this up afterwards. So that's big. But even still, I'm in communication with Janet Porter, who is a leader in Ohio on life issues, and she is my partner on the heartbeat bill. And we have 16 states that have passed some version of, I'll say it this way, our heartbeat bill. I had that bill to 174 co-sponsors in Congress, and I had the votes to pass it and the votes to bring it out of committee. And Kevin McCarthy killed that bill. So I wasn't all that sorry to see that he had to give up the gavel, to say that very mildly. But Janet Porter says this is not the final word. The state legislature in Ohio will be looking at this thing. There's a question as to constitutional challenges of this amendment, the vagueness of the definitions that are there. They will be doing everything they can to reverse this. And one of the things I would say is 2 years from now, you can have a ballot referendum on the ballot in Ohio that nullifies this, reverses it, or amends it. And when they realize what they voted for, I don't think they realize it, because I couldn't understand it in the first reading. And I think I understand it now because I've got it underlined with red ink in multiple places. But I don't think they do. And over the period of a couple of years, the people in Ohio will realize what they've done. And there's likely to be some stark examples of, say, a 12-year-old girl that gets pregnant by some statutory rape, it would likely be, and goes and gets an abortion, and the parents have no knowledge of it. There's no provision here that even allows for parental notification, parental consent, or any intervention of any kind. It's just simply it's the wish list of the abortionists is what they passed in Ohio, and I can't imagine how that could stand in a country that has a moral foundation.
Wow.
I believe that Ohio still has a moral foundation.
Yeah, that sounds like an activist bill, not really crafted with any sort of legal ramifications in mind. And just to finish up with this last question, Steve, you raised a good point a minute or two ago when you were talking about how Republicans sort of skated and fled the issue of abortion. And it's still being talked about now that because Republicans refused to give up the issue of abortion, that's why they lost races. How do you respond to that?
Well, I've been elected 9 times to the United States Congress, and I never shied away from that at all. Everybody knew. And if they forgot about it, I'd remind them. I don't believe that. The people on the wrong side of the argument will use that. They use the rationale that suits their argument, and that's what that is. I would say the other way around is, instead of it, Democrats bludgeoned Republicans with the abortion issue, and Republicans curled up and didn't fight back. And so who do you think is going to win that? The other way around, if we'd come out straight front forward and said, even though this was gone to the states now, eventually it's the responsibility of the federal government to conform these varying laws and conform them on the side of life. We were poised to do that. I would make that argument. I'd say if I had any opportunity, I'm going to support a heartbeat bill at the federal level, because these babies deserve to be protected, and they don't deserve to have it's almost a bounty on their head. It's a constitutional amendment that says there's no protection for a baby allowed, an unborn baby allowed in Ohio. That's what this thing says. I'd love to pound on those people on the other side in a political campaign, and you're going to win. I know that I had, in 2014, I had a really intense race. It was against the governor's wife. And so they poured a lot of money into that. And they decided to attack me because I'm a supporter of the fair tax, the national sales tax, and abolishing the IRS. So they began to run heads and pound me on that. Well, okay, that's fine with me. And I got a hold of John Linder, who was the original sponsor in Congress. He came to Iowa, and we went around and did fair tax events all over the district. And it didn't take them very long to pull that ad. Go right at them. And that didn't happen. We ran from them, and this is what we get. Take them on out in the field, nose to nose, toe to toe.
Well, I think I agree with you that conservatives in America are sick of unprincipled Republican Party members and leadership. And you know what? You, on that point, had the last word, though, because you got to write "Walking Through the Fire, My Fight for the Heart and Soul of America." So all your attackers, they didn't get the last word with you. So that's a good thing.
I knew I had to do it, Cheryl. I couldn't have lived with myself if I didn't without it.
Well, good for you.
I got a copy in your hand, and I wrote some kind words in there, I hope, because I mean them.
Yep.
But also, this is maybe we could do another segment at another time on there's a big topic here in this state, and it is the Inflation Reduction Act put hundreds of billions of dollars out for sequestering CO2. Our ethanol plants are the largest volume of the purest form known anywhere in the world, and now there are people fighting over using eminent domain for private gain to bulldoze their way through the best farmland in the world to build pipelines to connect all these ethanol plants and send that CO2 to North Dakota.
Wow.
I'm in the middle of that fight, and the reason I bring that up is because some of those people that turned on me back in 2019 and 20, they're the ones lined up in favor of this pipeline. And now I think I understand their motive better than I did when I wrote my book.
Well, yes, you will definitely come back on and we'll do a show dedicated to that issue. It's huge. It's not going to end anyhow. The whole climate change is the tool of the left going forward. So I want to thank you for your investigation into that, but really just thank you for standing strong on faith and constitutional principles. It was great to speak with you again, Steve.
All my pleasure, and I look forward to the next time. Thanks for the work you do, Cheryl.
Thank you. And that's another Bold and Blunt. If you like Bold and Blunt, remember you may get Bold and Blunt at edify.app, at washingtontimes.com, at Real Life Network, and wherever podcasts are offered. And if you are already a subscriber, thank you very much. I truly appreciate it. Tune in next time. And in the meanwhile, don't forget, stay blunt, stay bold.